What is up, fellow college football fans and fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Couz. Welcome to Couz's Corner live stream. We're here to talk Kansas State, West Virginia, preview of this upcoming game on Saturday. We'll be joined shortly by Mr. John Kurtz, former Kansas State play-by-play guy, and also has his own YouTube channel. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I asked before we get started, if you don't mind, go ahead and hit that like button on this video. It will get it out, promote it through YouTube, and help us get more people on here. Enjoy me a good cup of Joe. Ready to get started here. It's going to be an interesting game this weekend. Tell you what, even though these teams have different, obviously Kansas State 6-3 and West Virginia. Well, Mr. Kurtz is here. Let's get him in. How you doing, John?
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. Was just getting ready to talk about how these two teams statistically, man, if you look at these two teams statistically are really close, but we'll get into that in a minute. But while we're waiting on people to jump on here, how's your new job going?
It's been going pretty well. Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It's been a change of pace for me for sure. Kind of jumping into the corporate world, leaving the radio world, but got a chance to move to Kansas City, back where I'm from, leaving Manhattan, and still obviously with the YouTube channel and doing a podcast, able to keep my feet in the water there. So yeah, things have been pretty good, getting adjusted to everything right now.
So if you don't mind explaining, what is it you're doing now, John?
Yeah, just a marketing job with a real estate company here in Kansas City. Really good company, okay. Great people. I've really enjoyed it so far. So yeah, there are a lot of perks to it that I think will be really good and kind of help me out and where I'm trying to get in life. So very happy about it.
Awesome, man. Congrats. So you went a completely different direction then, really, didn't you? From radio.
Yeah, pretty different now. I know kind of how you have to sell yourself in the job interview, right? There are a lot of transferable skills and things that I was doing. I think it's an organization that definitely helped out. But yeah, it is a little bit different for sure.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you still have to have that ability to communicate. I mean, obviously with what you're doing, and I'm sure your radio background and TV broadcasting background has been a huge benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing a lot of writing too, which I really enjoy and probably didn't get a chance to do as much as I would have really liked to in my previous role. So I'm fired up about that, kind of develop some new skills and move on to a different chapter of life. Right.
Cool, man. Everybody, John has his own, most of you probably here probably know John, obviously, but if you don't, he's John Kurtz. He's has his own YouTube channel. Go check him out. I'll put a link in the description box for a few of you who may not know him. Covered a lot of Big 12. A lot of conference realignment, a lot of, talks K-State. He's a K-State alum, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, John?
Yep, that is correct.
And has done some play-by-play stuff, radio stuff with K-State, so he knows K-State football as well as about anybody, I would imagine. And, John, before we get into K-State, I'd like to get your thoughts a little bit on, I've been listening to some of your opinions on the college football playoff poll. I know we got a new one coming out tomorrow. I personally don't anticipate a whole lot of changes other than Michigan State obviously will probably drop out, but I expect Ohio State will probably fill that spot. What's your thoughts on Cincinnati getting snubbed along with Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the frustrating part because I'm with you. If I were predicting what I think is going to happen, I think you're right. There's not going to be much change, and it'll be the line of thinking like, well, everybody looked bad last week. Nobody had a really nice win. So let's just keep everybody the same. And to me, that is just so frustrating because you have Oklahoma who didn't play and they were really penalized for these quote unquote bad wins, all season. And now we're seeing like Alabama at this point. They have the Florida game that was really close. They have the LSU game that was really close. And those are two sub 500 teams, one with a fired coach and one with potentially a fired coach, depending on what happens there at Florida, and a team that just got blasted by South Carolina this weekend. Ohio State, Cincinnati's getting crushed right now for a close game with Tulsa. Ohio State was in a one-score game with Tulsa at the Horseshoe in the fourth quarter, and Tulsa had the ball at one point in time there. Now, Ohio State scored a couple of garbage time touchdowns to make that final score look more lopsided than it was, but that was absolutely a game and a real clunker for Ohio State, and we've seen them do that now. I mean, Penn State, throwing Penn State. Obviously, they have a loss, which Cincinnati does not. And speaking of that, I mean, Oregon messing around with Washington. They've also lost to Stanford, who was a 3-6 team that just got 50 hung on them by Utah. I mean, we've seen this with everybody, but for whatever reason, well, I think we kind of know the reasons because of what league that both of these schools are from, the Big 12 and soon to be the Big 12, but right now the AAC. It's just been more harshly just thrown upon Cincinnati and Oklahoma, this idea of having bad wins. And so to me, that's why, like, I think the committee should, in a perfect world, in an ideal world, in a just world, adjust their rankings and say, well, look, we were probably too hard on Oklahoma. This weekend's a really good example of that it is actually tough to win games week in and week out, and we should reward them more for doing that instead of penalizing them the way that we did before. Cincinnati, I mean, I just think the committee, to be honest, I don't think that Cincinnati's result on Saturday really changed much because I think the committee had kind of already set this parameter, like, we don't think you're good enough to be in here. And whether Cincinnati beat Tulsa by 50 or by whatever it was, 7, 8, I guess it was 8, right? 28-20. Whether it was 50 or whether it was 8, the committee was still going to think Cincinnati's not worthy of the playoff. So unfortunately for Cincy, I don't think it affects them all that much. But like Oklahoma, if the committee could at least reverse some of that logic with this poll, I mean, that would earn a lot of respect with me, but I don't think that is going to unfortunately happen.
Right. Did you happen to catch the interview that this 365 Sports guys did with John Bartu of CFB Matrix?
I did not.
I touched on it in one of my videos, but he basically, in a nutshell, apparently, I don't know this. I had never heard of this guy before, but CFB Matrix, apparently he's a consultant and an analyst, and he's big into data. And he must have something to do with the data that's used because he kept using the word we when he was talking about the committee. He's not on the committee, but apparently he's worked with the committee and he knows what they look at. And he was talking about all the different parameters. There's 8 parameters that they look at, top 25 wins, what they call game control, which is basically a professional way of saying margin of victory, conference championships, things like that, all the things that are supposed to matter. And he claims that when you that they rank them without putting a name beside it at first, 1 through 130. And that if you do that, Cincinnati was actually number 3.
Wow.
But when the committee saw that it was Cincinnati and they saw that it was a non-Power 5 team, they moved them out to 6 because he claimed that they do not like he said they do not like group of 5 schools. And there is he said, I won't say never, but it's almost, he said group of 5 almost never has a path to get in the Final Four, the college football playoff, because he said it's been set up like that from the beginning.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's immensely frustrating. And also, I mean, first of all, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm going to go check that out. The Sikkim guys do an awesome job. Everybody that's interested in this content, certainly worth giving those guys a look as well. But they've really said as much with their actions too. I mean, the way that they treated Cincinnati last year, the way that they treated UCF back in 2017 and then even 2018. That's been the MO and the way that this has gone the entire time. And you could just tell by how the goalposts continue to change, because once upon a time it was the answer to group of 5 schools was, well, you got to play somebody. And the answer that was given at that time, I'm trying to remember who was the committee chair at that point in time, but regardless, it was 2016, I believe, when Houston beat Oklahoma to start the year, but then wound up losing a couple games along the way. And the answer then was like, oh, look, Houston did what they needed to do. They went and played a Power 5 team, played a good schedule in the non-con, and they went and beat them. And that's what you have to do to get into the playoff. Well, now fast forward to 2021, it's exactly what Cincinnati did. I mean, they scheduled 2 Power 5 teams, 2 road games. They won them both, one of them at Notre Dame Stadium, which that is not a place that Notre Dame loses games.
Right.
The only loss for Notre Dame, nothing more that you could have asked for. And Cincinnati's ranked 6th, and they have no shot. And then clearly, I mean, the other part of this that is under discussed is, what the committee's been doing on the back end of the rankings to kind of finagle what they're doing at the top end of the rankings, because Minnesota was ranked 20th last week, which was just asinine based on their resume. That's a team that's lost to Bowling Green. They had no really good wins. That was completely out of nowhere. And what does that serve to do? Well, it boosts Ohio State's resume, right? Mississippi State, out of nowhere, is ranked 17th. And you're like, what is that? Well, that's a win that Alabama has. And then Mississippi State promptly loses, just like Minnesota promptly loses at home to Illinois. And the same thing happened with the AAC, where SMU and Houston both deserve to be ranked 10 times over before those two teams that I just mentioned, but they're not in the top 25. And so now Cincinnati has no shot at top 25 wins the rest of the way if they're not going to rank SMU and Houston. Now, to be fair, I understand SMU then, I don't know, Sonny Dykes, I would think that some of the stuff going on with him probably affected them this weekend in their loss. But still, I mean, Houston should be in there. Houston should be ranked. It's just incredibly frustrating, and the disrespect to the league. I mean, I thought Mike Oresco of the AAC was right to speak out about that, because at this point, like, what do you have to lose? It's kind of like Bob Bowlesby back in July coming at ESPN with the tortious interference claims, and as fired up as he was. At that point, you don't have anything to lose. I mean, you might as well voice your opinion and what you feel is really going on there. So I was actually pretty on board with Oresco's comments there. So it all syncs up. It all syncs up with what you heard in that interview from the Sikkim guys. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they actually he made the comment as well that from 15 back to 25, they removed all non-Power 5 teams from the 15 through 20, from the back end of the rankings in order to prop up. He called it the prop 20. He said it ain't even the top 25; it's the prop 25 because they use those teams to prop up the top 14 or top 10 or top 4, whatever you want to call it, the front end of the standings, the rankings. So I mean, he admitted it. He said, but he said it ain't the committee's fault. He said it's the fault of, I think his name's Bill Hancock.
Yeah.
Who set the whole thing up. It was set up that way from the beginning. And really the only way in my mind that it's ever going to change is if the playoffs get expanded, which is what we all want, I think, at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is likely where we're headed. It's been frustrating to me reading some of the updates about said playoff expansion, because you have like John Swofford of the ACC apparently trying to stand in the, not stand in the way of expansion, but wanting it to be an 8-team playoff, which I don't, if you look at the ACC this year, that doesn't really make too much sense. I don't, I mean, you'd want it to, I would think, open it up to be as big as possible. I guess if you're going to automatically qualify your conference champion in there, maybe it doesn't make that much difference, but 12 is the most reasonable thing. It makes the most sense. It gives the most access. And then if we're arguing like this about resumes and it's teams 12, 13, and 14, as opposed to 4, 5, and 6, I think we'll all just sleep a lot better at the end of the day, feeling like you still got the best teams into the playoff field. So I think that will make a big difference. And I'm with you. That's the only way anything's going to change regarding just access for group of 5 teams. And, even schools like Oklahoma, schools in a league like the Big 12 that may be under-respected broadly and nationally, you can still get a league champion in there and have a chance to go prove it. It at least gives you the opportunity to go do that. Whereas right now, they can just shut down the access and you don't really have that.
Right. I don't want to get too deep onto I know I want to talk some K-State. I want to talk some on the field stuff with you, John, because I know that's probably what you and I both enjoy talking about the most. Talking about our teams, right?
For sure. Absolutely.
So, let's, if you don't mind, I'm gonna switch gears to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
I was looking at I'm looking at the stats for these two teams. I mean, obviously West Virginia's record's 4-5. It's not good right now. K-State's 6-3, so they're sitting okay. I don't know what your all's expectations were going into the season, but I would think that you guys are pretty content with that right now. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's really interesting just in the way that it's played out. Like if you would have told most fans you're going to be 6-3, 9 games in early November, I think everybody would have looked around and said, yeah, that seems about right, and we'll take it. The way the season played out, though, with the schedule, I mean, they got the toughest 3 teams in the Big 12 right out of the chute. They went at Ohio State and then back-to-back with Oklahoma and Iowa State. So started off the year with 3 wins, a nice non-conference, beat up on Stanford. They beat Nevada without Skylar Thompson, and Nevada's turned out to be a pretty good team this year. So there were high hopes, and then, man, went to Stillwater without Skylar Thompson, couldn't move the ball at all, looked really bad. Came back, Skylar's first game back against Oklahoma, frustrating game, relatively close, but just never able to get over the hump, and then lost the game to Iowa State pretty handily, and that's turned into a rivalry. That's a school that K-State fans do not like to lose to at all. And it was not just losing that, it's losing back-to-back years in pretty resounding fashion to the Cyclones. So 3 weeks into the Big 12 schedule, I mean, there was a lot of frustration built up and a lot of people, starting to get to the point of questioning Chris Klieman and where this is going. And, you have some fans feeling strongly enough, I'll just say this. I had to tweet out what his buyout was, which is pretty prohibitive cost-wise for K-State right now, for anybody that's curious. And it felt very premature to me to even have to do that, but that was just the reality of the situation. So it's been just kind of a roller coaster ride to get to this 6-3, which has been Chris Klieman's MO really since he came here. 2019, they won 8 games. They went 8-4, which I think was a massive success, but they did it by winning 3, losing 2, winning 3, losing 2. So that's just been the way it's gone with Klieman at K-State, and you just kind of have to ride the waves. Right now, you just hope that this continues if you're a K-State fan as much as possible, because I think reasonable expectations, my expectation was 7-5 coming into the year, and I think most fans would be there, 7-5, 8-4. To kind of reset after last year, a palate cleansing season, so to speak. After last year, they had COVID, they lost their quarterback, and they went 4-6. I think everybody felt like you can get back to 7-5, 8-4 where you were 2 years ago and sort of reset. That would be a pretty successful season. So I think they're on track for that. And now all of a sudden, the back half of the schedule, you can look at it one of two ways. Either it's all extremely winnable with West Virginia, Texas, and Baylor, or these are 3 teams that Chris Klieman is a combined 0-6 against, and West Virginia in particular has just totally vexed K-State for the last 6 years. I mean, 2015 was the last time they won, and K-State has just not been able to solve West Virginia. It doesn't matter if K-State's been the heavy favorite or not. That has been a real bugaboo. So this will be tricky. I think this will be very, very tricky for K-State.
Yeah, it's funny. So a lot of the things you said there there's a lot of similarities in the programs. Obviously, Brown and Klieman came in at the same year. We got a lot of our fans, yelling for Neil Brown to be fired. Just like, you're talking about with Klieman having to explain his buyout. It's just, which I agree, same with me, I think it's very premature. I mean, 2.5 years in, give a guy some time to build his program with his recruits for 2 to 3 years. And then if you don't see improvement, then maybe we can have the conversation. That's the way I approach it, especially with programs like ours. I mean, we're not Alabama, we're not Ohio State. We're not expecting to win conference titles every year, at least, from our perspective.
Right.
And we knew that when Dana Holgorsen left, he left the cupboard really bare from a talent perspective as far as depth. Well, I mean, we had some talented players, but we didn't have a lot of depth. Because he put all his eggs in that 2018 basket. He just knew that 2018 team was a team that was going to win the conference, and he kind of went all in. And when it didn't happen, we didn't have a lot of high school talent because he built teams with with transfers pretty much. So we didn't have a whole lot of younger players, a lot of depth in a lot of positions. And Coach Brown is doing the opposite. He's wanting to build it with high school talent and just use recruits to plug holes, basically. So, if you want to do that, it's going to take 3 or 4 years to get those high school players here and get them developed. But when you look at these two teams statistically, even though their records are going, like you said, 6-3 and 4-5, I mean, points per game, West Virginia's at 27, Kansas State's at 28. Points allowed per game, West Virginia 23, Kansas State 22. Total yards, West Virginia 375, Kansas State 379. I mean, it's all down, all across the board. The one area where K-State probably has the biggest advantage would be rushing. K-State rushes for 159 yards a game, West Virginia only 115. But then you get passing, it's kind of flip-flop. So West Virginia has a slight advantage. But that's basically because we have a running game. And we've had to pass the ball so much. But I just find it interesting that you got two teams whose records are completely different, but statistically are pretty even. So that goes to show you how games, one possession, two possessions in a game can make a difference. And I think Kansas State, it looks to me, I haven't got to watch a lot of Kansas State this year yet, but it looks like they've made plays when they need, like in key moments in games, like third downs, for example, and West Virginia hasn't. That's probably the difference when you look at these two teams and why one's 6-3 and one's 4-5. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's a ton of difference really between these two teams, and I think that's pretty indicative of. I haven't checked the line today. I know that it opened at K-State -6, which even to me, I was like, I was expecting more like 4 or 5. But even if you take 6, okay, so you give 3. Typically, Vegas is going to give 3 points for a home field advantage, right? So Vegas is saying there's a field goal difference between these two teams, and I think that's pretty accurate. I don't think there's a lot of difference, and I think there really is something too. Like, for whatever reason, West Virginia has just been a tough cookie for K-State to crack, and I think the perfect example is a game that honestly feels very similar to me in the setup of it 2 years ago in 2019. Both of the first year for both of these guys. West Virginia was a pretty heavy underdog in that game. K-State was in the midst of its late season surge under Kleiman at that point, where they had won 3, lost a couple, then came back and they whooped up Kansas. They beat Oklahoma and beat TCU as well. And it was coming off of that stretch that they then take on West Virginia in Manhattan. And I think a lot of K-State fans felt like, all right, this will be an easy win. K-State's going to wrap up a 9-win regular season here. And West Virginia, after giving up a touchdown on the first offensive play of the game to K-State, just locked them down and wound up winning that game in Manhattan in 2019. So it feels to me like the setup to it is very, very similar, and that should have K-State really concerned. And I think it's definitely a team that is capable of beating K-State, no doubt, especially if West Virginia can get, better quarterback play. That's now, again, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I've watched West Virginia very little this year, just kind of from afar, but it does seem like a lot of the frustration has surrounded Doege at quarterback, right? And some of the quarterback play issues there for the Mountaineers. If he plays really well, which it seemed like was happening before the game on Saturday against Oklahoma State, then I think K-State could definitely be in trouble.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a complete Jekyll and Hyde with him. The Iowa State game, he looked honestly the best he's looked since he's been here. He had a career high in passing yards, career high here. He was a transfer from Bowling Green, and I think he had one game at Bowling Green where he threw for more than 370, but it was his highest completion, his highest yardage game since he's gotten to Morgantown. He didn't throw a pick, which he's been known to throw picks this year. Which is ironic because up until this year he hadn't been doing that. So it's just really odd. I mean, you've got a guy who's a 5th-year senior basically, and he's not protecting the football, which is head scratching to me. He's not reading Saturday. He was not reading the field real well. Now, look, a lot of our fans want to put all the blame on him, and you and I both know that's not realistic. I mean, the offensive line didn't do him a lot of favors at all either. They did not play a good game, and I think a lot of it was Oklahoma State's game plan, to be perfectly honest. And their defense is really, really good.
Yeah,
and they played a great game. I mean, they weren't missing tackles like our guys was. If they were in one-on-one, they were bringing us down. I mean, we just couldn't break tackles. It was just an all-around dominant performance by their defense. So I got to give them some credit in that regard. But Doege he wasn't, even when he did have open guys, he wasn't seeing them. And when you're playing against a team and you've only got 2 to 3 seconds to get rid of the ball, he wasn't doing it. Now against Iowa State, he had 3, 4, 5 seconds all day long, and he was picking them apart. But the difference is Iowa State wasn't pressuring him a whole lot. When Doege gets pressured and starts getting hit, man, he just doesn't seem to handle it real well. So I don't know how does Kansas State. I know they've got that. I don't even want to butcher this guy's name, but you have a defensive end who's leading the nation in sacks.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's one thing that just triggers something with me where I say, okay, well that should be an advantage to K-State then, because Felix Anudike-Uzomah has been pretty much unblockable for the last 3 or 4 weeks. We saw flashes of it early in the season, but his dominant stretches, of course, coincided with K-State's win streak here. And it started in Lubbock when K-State was being completely outplayed in the first half by Texas Tech. He flipped the game on its head with one of the most amazing plays you'll ever see to force a safety, where he just blew up an offensive lineman at Texas Tech right around the goal line, made a play while being held and tackled down to the ground in the end zone. And that totally turned the game over. K-State rolled from there. They beat Texas Tech. Then he had a game in which, I mean, the NCAA absolutely robbed him. He had 6 sacks against TCU. 2 of them were forced fumbles. And what happened was after the game, the NCAA came around and said because they were forced fumbles that went forward, even though K-State recovered the fumbles, it goes down as positive rushing yardage for TCU in the stat book. So therefore, it cannot be considered a sack. So basically, because he forced a fumble and did his job better than just picking up regular sacks, he didn't actually get credit with the record, which would have been tied for the most in a game in NCAA history.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was one of the most dominant performances I've ever seen. So he's just taken off. A really great story to a kid that he was going to go just attend Missouri as a student. He had lost a scholarship to North Dakota State, and K-State came in at the very last minute and decided to offer him a scholarship a couple of years ago. Awesome. That has made a world of difference in K-State's pass rush, which has made a world of difference in the defense, and that's really been the key from the 3-game losing streak to the 3-game winning streak. It's been the defense. The defense has played a lot better. The offense has been pretty solid most of the year. The defense was horrible the first 3 games of Big 12 play, and they have been really good the last 3. So that to me is the question: is does this defensive resurgence continue to take hold? Is it for real? Is it legit? Or has it been just a byproduct of playing Kansas and then TCU, the game that literally got Gary Patterson fired, the game that literally got Matt Wells fired at Texas Tech? How much of it is the competition versus the defense actually improving?
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting because you look, does he play the right side or the left side, or do they move him around a lot?
You'll see him move around. You'll definitely see him move around some. Yeah.
Because unfortunately for us, the weakest part of our O-line is our tackles. So we have to use the tight end a lot to help out there. We've got a true freshman on one end. Now, he's going to be a star. A true freshman starting right tackle. And then we've got a left tackle who's a redshirt sophomore, I believe, Brandon Yates. And he's had some struggles. He's going to be good because, like I said, he's only a sophomore. But we're just really young up front, man. And I thought our O-line would be really good this year because they all have game experience. But what I didn't take into consideration was Power 5 football, you really need a lot of juniors and seniors on that front line if you want to be any good. Because 1 year of experience is really not enough at this level.
No, a freshman physically. I mean, K-State went through some of that last year where they were able to play Carver Willis, a true freshman, some reps at left tackle. It's like you're not going to survive long term like that in the Big 12. It's just completely different than any other position out there on the field.
And I think that's been, and and Daggy, even though Daggy's had some great moments, he's not a quarterback that can, he's not quick at all. He's slow. He's not, his feet. I mean, he's kind of like a statue back there. No offense to the kid. I mean, he's a great kid and he can throw the ball, but that's not his strength. And he needs time. And if he doesn't have time, he struggles. And we've got backup Garrett Green who's been playing some, but he's pretty much a run-only quarterback at this point. He's thrown the ball a few times, but with very little success, and they don't really trust him to throw the ball downfield much. And, he's only a freshman as well. So we're just young. We've only got 3 seniors that start on that side of the ball, Daggy being one of them. But you're right. Our fans are frustrated with Daggy a lot. But, it's not all his fault, but, the quarterback gets all the blame and all the praise when we're doing well. So I guess that's just par for the course at that position. But it's one of those deals where he's I don't know how to explain it. He's not a star. He's not a Will Greer. He's not a Geno Smith. He's a game manager basically. But when you have a game manager, you need enough help around you, and he doesn't have it right now. So I just think that's our biggest issue. Our defense has been playing good. I mean, our defense played well enough to beat Oklahoma State. We had them to 24 points, and that was with short field all day. I mean, we had 2 turnovers. We got pinned inside the 10. I don't know how many times, multiple times, and then of course we'd go 3 and out and have to punt to them, and they'd get the ball at midfield. They had the ball at midfield almost all day, and we still had them to 24 points. So I thought our defense played well. Offense could not get anything going. But what I was looking at with K-State is, number one, it seems like it seems like they're a different football team when Skylar Thompson's in there. Is that an accurate assessment? What is it about him that makes him such a difference maker?
Yeah, no, 100%. They're a way different team with him. In fact, I just saw a stat the other day. I'm going to try and get this right. It was Chris Kleiman with Skylar Thompson, I think, is 16-8, and without is 3-6. Now, you have to take into account some of that last year. It was having to play a true freshman quarterback in a pandemic year where they didn't even really get an offseason with him. So that really hurt with Will Howard. But even this year, you saw, I mean, Howard, they would like to tell you that he improved a lot. And there are some areas in which you can tell he improved, but he still has a massive turnover problem, was very turnover prone in the short time that we saw him this year. And that made a world of difference. Skylar's typically pretty good at taking care of the ball. He's a really interesting case because I think most people around the league respect him, and he's definitely worthy of respect. And I think at the end of the day, he's an above average Big 12 quarterback, but he's been good enough, and he has these moments of brilliance where you think, man, this guy could be really, really good, but it's not consistently there. And then he'll have some deep balls that he misses. He'll have some plays that he misses. And it's been really frustrating for the fans. Like he's actually a fairly polarizing player to the fans because I think he's good enough to like leave you wanting more and thinking that he's capable of more. But then there are some ups and downs. He's just always been, he's beaten Oklahoma twice where he's played phenomenal. He beat a top 10 Oklahoma State team on the road back in 2017 as well, where he looked great. And then he's had games like people would point out the 2019 West Virginia game, for instance, where he was off. He was not very good. And they lost to a team that people feel like they should not have lost to that year. And so that's just kind of how things have played out. But by this point, what he is, you said game manager, like, he might scoff at that a little bit, but I think for a lot of his career, that's what he was. I always made the comparison to Alex Smith, and that resonated around here because we have a lot of Chiefs fans, obviously, but really athletic and made a lot of plays with his legs, decent enough arm, but not great, and really relied a lot on the legs. Well, since he had his injury earlier this year, which is a knee issue that I don't think has totally gone away, he's not running hardly at all anymore. And it's totally transformed the offense in the way that they're playing, where he has to hang in the pocket and just deliver balls all the time. A lot of short stuff, dump offs to Deuce Vaughn, where you can just get it to him in space, check downs to Deuce Vaughn. And it's actually, the offense has been great. I think there was a lot of concern at the time when the injury happened, like if he's not able to run, how is this offense going to function? Because he did it so much, but I think it's forced him to stay in the pocket more and actually made him a better passer. So there's been actually a blessing in disguise to the injury he suffered against Southern Illinois this year. And he's looked pretty good. Still some ups and downs. I mean, against Kansas, for instance, broken play. He hits Malik Knowles for about a 55-yard touchdown down the middle of the field where he threw a perfect ball. And then later in the game, they run a great play where they get Deuce Vaughn wide open. I mean, nobody within 15 yards of him in the end zone. Skylar doesn't put enough air under the ball, throws a line drive. It's incomplete, and they wind up missing a field goal on that drive. So you still have some of that. But what he is really smart, very athletic, knows the offense, really pretty deep ball when it's on, but can be inconsistent with that. That's pretty much Skylar Thompson right now in a nutshell.
Yeah. There again, other than the athletic part, I see some similarities to Jarrett Doege. And, of course, Doege's not been playing that smart this year, unfortunately. He did the previous 2 seasons or season and a half. Actually, he didn't win the starting job in 19. He actually – the Kansas State game, I think, was actually his first game starting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And he beat you guys. Played great. Well, he didn't play great, but he played pretty good.
It was pretty good. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I always have respect for him because that game – is lodged in my mind because, it was kind of a surprise that he played at quarterback. And I don't think everybody, at least on K-State side, was aware of the fact that was a great plan by Neil Brown. Like, hold off, wait, and preserve the red shirt, playing those last 4 games that year. And he was way more effective than, was it Austin Kendall that was playing quarterback for him?
Yes.
Way more effective than him at that point in time. So I've always been impressed because I remember that game.
Just to show you how crazy it's been at quarterback here, Doege won the job over Kendall last season and started the entire year. We get in the bowl game against Army. We're getting destroyed in the first half. He benches Doege at halftime. Austin Kendall comes out in the second half and wins the game. I think he threw 2 touchdowns in the second half and we win the game. Kendall transfers out this year. He goes and plays at, I think it's Louisiana or wherever he's at. From what I hear, he's doing pretty well, and I wish him the best. But then, of course, now Daggy wins the job from the two freshmen. We have Daggy and 2 freshmen right now. He wins the job over them, but there's just the inconsistencies are still there. It's just so frustrating, man, because you can see how good he can. The Iowa State game, he showed us how good he can be, but then he regresses again against Oklahoma State and looks like he did again, like in the Baylor game or the first half of Texas Tech. I mean, it's just first half of Texas Tech, second half of Texas Tech, 2 completely different offenses, 2 completely different quarterbacks. Same guy. Yep. It's just you don't ever like. So this weekend, it's going to depend on which Mountaineer team shows up, which offense shows up. Our defense has shown up pretty much every week, with the exception of, I mean, they've given up some big plays, but overall they've played good enough. They've played, with the exception of Baylor, our defense has played good enough to win every game. Our offense just hasn't been there. So we could really, I mean, we really should be, what are we, 4-5? We should be 7-2 or 6-3 realistically right now, probably. Were it not for our offense being so inept, and it's been at critical times. Like, and Daggy he'll play great all day, and then it'll be, you know, a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, and he'll throw a pick 6, or he'll miss a wide open guy in the end zone. I mean, it's just right at the end, you know, on a third down on a game-ending drive. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that has drove our fan base absolutely insane. and I don't know what and our fan base, he you know, because of COVID, he has another year of eligibility remaining. I don't know if he'll come back. If he does, our fans are going to blow a gasket because they don't want him back. I mean, I hate to say it, but they don't, because even I've been defending him a lot because I think he's gotten a lot of undue criticism. But because of all the controversy and all the polarization, I think he needs to move on, because I think our team, we need to move on with somebody else behind under center for the future, in my opinion, as a fan. And we got you was talking about the red shirt. We have a freshman named Will Goose. He goes by Goose Crowder, who's supposed to be really good. He was either 3 or 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He's only played in 1 game this year, so there's part of me that hopes he gets some action late in the season, because we haven't really seen him yet against any. He played cleanup time against the division, you know, FCS team that we beat by 60 points. So really didn't, in my opinion, didn't really get to show us much. He threw the ball a few times and looked good doing it, but what can he do against tougher competition? So maybe we see something similar this year that we did in 2019. That's kind of what I'm hoping. But with Daggy getting benched this time, and the other guy coming in.
Yeah. It's funny. My brain was going there before you even said it. I was like, oh man, maybe K-State gets the wool pulled over their eyes once again with that. That would be very intriguing. But yeah, and again, I sense the similarities that you're talking about between the 2 fan bases and how they feel about their quarterback, because I think Skylar Thompson theoretically would have the potential to come back. That was at least being discussed when he had his knee injury earlier this year, right? Like, would anybody want it back for it? And the answer was a pretty resounding no, even though it's clear that he is a much better quarterback than Will Howard at this stage in his career and what they have. I think by this point, everybody's kind of fatigued on it, and just the program needs to move on. And that's going to be the biggest question mark, is how do you solve the quarterback issues beyond Skylar, and can you do it in the future moving forward? But very similar, I think, in the way that the fans view the two, where, like, even if Skylar could come back next year, I don't think many people are really, and he's not, you know, he's been around since 2016 in the program. So, like, he's ready to move on with life for sure.
Right. I agree. And I have a feeling Daggy will do the same. I mean, he's been playing college football for 5 years now. He's, you know, I don't know what else he has to prove or offer. I mean, unless he just wants to continue his degree and just loves to play the game. Because I don't think he'll play at the next level. Be surprised if he does.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he'll do like Austin Kendall did. I mean, and transfer to somewhere else where he gets more, you know. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. What do you think? I was looking third down percentage. K-State is doing really well this year on third downs. They're like converting like 45% of the third downs. Is that Deuce? Is that because of Deuce Vaughn, who, by the way, we haven't even talked about enough yet? That guy is phenomenal. He's like 11th in the country in all-purpose yards right now. What makes them so good on third down?
I think that's probably been some of it lately. It's been, the fact that Skylar has been more confident in like staying in the pocket, delivering some balls when I think in the past he may have looked to take off and run, which has been helpful in third down and goal line situations before. But I think he's been even more effective, like taking that extra second to try and go find somebody and deliver a strike down the field. And then you're right. A big part of it too has been the ability of Deuce Vaughn to make some people miss on some checkdowns, and that's turned into, in essence, an extension of K-State's running game, and that's why his all-purpose yardage is so high, because he does a lot of his damage catching balls out of the backfield, 100%. And it's interesting you bring up third downs, because I think another point of emphasis here for me on what K-State's been this year would be on the other side. That was the defense was just getting killed on third down during the 3-game losing streak. Brock Purdy picked them apart. Spencer Rattler picked them apart, which obviously has not aged very well. Trying to think what was the other game in there. Oh, Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders and Jalen Warren, the combination of those two, they definitely picked them apart too. So the defense getting things turned around on third down and being able to actually get off the field has made a massive difference. So I think you've seen the offense get better on third down, the defense get better on third down, and that is translated very, very well to what's actually happening out there on the field. Yeah. And I'll say, what's up to Nighttime? I see Nighttime popping up on there.
Yep. He's a mutual supporter.
Yeah, appreciate it, Nighttime. What's up, man?
Yeah, Nighttime's been a good supporter of mine as well, so we appreciate it. He's going to be a fellow Big 12 fan very soon.
That's right. That's right.
Assuming West Virginia stays. There's that rumor that them going to the ACCs is still out there, but we'll see if that actually happens or not. I don't want to get down that rabbit trail. But I guess I don't want to take up all of your night, but what do you think your keys are to this game for K-State in order for K-State to win?
Yeah, I think we've definitely touched on some of it. I think getting pressure on Daggy absolutely is key, because K-State has been able to get better play from the back end of their defense simply because of the pressure that Felix Anudike-Uzomah is causing. It's really helped make up for the fact that they lost Khalid Duke for the year, who was what everybody thought was their best playmaker on defense going into the year. Now, I mean, there's an argument certainly there for Anudike-Uzomah, but just his resurgence has made a world of difference, where you don't have to worry as much about bringing different pressures and can leave some of the defensive backs back there. That's just going to be paramount. You need to continue to get that level of play from Anudike. And then offensively for K-State, I think being able to run the ball is always something that's really important for them. It's weird for me to say this, because it's not what you think of with a Chris Kleiman team. It's not what you think of with a K-State team. But like, the passing game has been pretty consistently there, and I don't have too much in the way of worry about that. But they have run into troubles when, for instance, at Oklahoma State, they just could not get any semblance of a running game going. Now, Skylar Thompson didn't play there. That made some difference in Oklahoma State being able to just load the box. But if they can't get a traditional running game going, really, with Deuce Vaughn or Joe Irvin, his backup is actually a pretty explosive playmaker as well, and they're only able to pass, and you're having to drop back all the time, then they can definitely get into some trouble. So I would say that. And then, I mean, the other thing to me that really makes a difference here is, like, I don't want to speak for these guys. I don't want to say that they're scared of West Virginia or anything like that, but the way that they have struggled as a program against West Virginia since 2015 and the last 2 years, where they got upset at home in 2019, and last year K-State was playing great football, actually, with Will Howard before that game in Morgantown. And that was a game that I remember talking about at the time, like, hey, you win this game, you're going to be in the Big 12 title race the rest of the year. Well, they got blasted and then lost out. So it was like the turning point of the season last year, that game in Morgantown. And I just wonder if there are some bad memories still lingering about what's happened the last 2 years there. And so I would say getting off to a fast start would be pretty key to just get some confidence. Like, hey, this is not going to go the way that it did the last 2 years. This is a demon. This is no doubt a demon for Chris Kleiman, that he needs to go actually solve this problem, not being able to beat West Virginia and having 2 pretty bad losses over the last years. So to me, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Chris Kleiman West Virginia to Kansas State has been Texas Tech to West Virginia because Neil Brown has yet to beat Texas Tech, believe it or not. 0-3 against them, which is baffling because Texas Tech has not been very good.
Yeah, that is pretty.
For whatever reason, West Virginia always plays one of their worst games of the year against Texas Tech. It's really strange. But in my opinion, for West Virginia to have a chance to win, we have got to run the football. We have to establish a running game because if we can't do that, Kansas State can tee off on Daggy all day long. And I think that was our problem last week. We weren't able to run the ball against that Oklahoma State defense. So they just pinned their ears. I mean, and Oklahoma State had been playing 4 down linemen most of the year, and they went into that game. They played 3 down linemen with very wide gaps. And the linebackers just blitzed and just tore Daggy up, man. And West Virginia couldn't find an answer for it for whatever reason. And of course, Oklahoma State's got that Malcolm Rodriguez who's really good, and he had a good game. But you talk about Uzomah. Is it Uzomah? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Uzomah. Yeah.
Uzomah. Well, Iowa State had Will McDonald, who we were worried about, and we were able to basically shut him down. So I don't. It's just I don't. We basically have 2 different football teams. I mean, almost. It just depends on which one shows up. I think for them, a lot of it is their youth. We got a lot of young guys, and I don't know. They just haven't gotten used to the mental part of the game. Could be coaching. Maybe they're getting out coached in a lot of these scenarios. Mike Gundy's a great coach, so I have no doubt. Last week we were out coached, and I'm not. That's not any type of negative towards Neil Brown because I like Neil Brown. I just think him and his staff got out coached by a veteran staff in Gundy.
Yeah,
which is not that. There's nothing to be ashamed of in that because Mike Gundy's, in my opinion, one of the best coaches in football. But establishing the run is West Virginia. To me, the most critical thing for them is to establish West Virginia has not lost a football game that Lady Brown has rushed for over 100 yards in. I mean, that right there is the most telling stat in my opinion. If he runs for over 100 yards, we normally win the game, almost 100% of the time. We may have lost one, but it's like it's either 0 or 1 losses we have. I can't remember, but I know it's pretty much a winning formula for us because if not, we're so one-dimensional. And it just, like I said, with Daggy not being very athletic, he doesn't move well in the pocket, and he doesn't always read the field well when he's getting hit. So, and he takes a lot of sacks. So if we can establish the run, I think we can win the game. If not, it's going to be a long day. That's, to me, I don't worry about our defense too much. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it'll be in the 20s probably. Both teams will probably be in the 20s because neither of these offenses seem too explosive to me. And I think they both play good defense. So I think it could come down to a field goal or, a key special teams mistake or something like that, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I feel lower scoring kind of a game. And it's funny you say that because even the last time K-State did beat West Virginia, it was in 2015. It happened because of a special teams play. Morgan Burns ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. And that was a game where I remember Dana Holgerson saying afterwards that basically Sean Snyder, who was K-State special teams coach, won the game. He was like, I've never seen a special teams coach have that much of an impact on the game, but he won the game. And that's another West Virginia memory I have. And obviously K-State still has some remnants of that. They're not quite what they used to be on special teams. You can tell that the emphasis isn't there as much, but they do have Malik Knowles, who's run a couple back this year and 3 or 4 in his career. So he's certainly dangerous and capable. And I think you could start looking at that. Another thing is K-State's got a new kicker. They have 2 new guy I think is going to be really good. Chris Tennant, who beat out Tate and Winkle for the job. I don't think Tate and Winkle is on the team anymore, and brought out Chris Tennant for a short chip shot field goal in Lawrence last week that he missed. So if it does come down to something like that, that is something I would point out to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, West Virginia's kicker has been solid. Casey Legg, he's missed 1 kick out of 14 or 15, and it was a block. So he's not actually. I mean, it's still a miss. It goes on down in the record books as a miss, but true misses, he's not had any of them. He's been very, very consistent, which is that's a cool story. The kid didn't even play football in high school at all. Played soccer, and then came to West Virginia, decided to try out for kicker, walked on the team, and this year ends up winning the job and ended up earning a scholarship, which is a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
But Stephen Cotner here says Felix Uzomah is a beast. Who gets to block Felix? Well, it's probably either, I touched on this earlier, we have our starting right tackle is Wyatt Milam, who's a true freshman. Our starting left tackle is Brandon Yates, who's a redshirt sophomore. And Milam is probably the best of the two talent-wise, but he is a true freshman. And what's hurt us, and I don't know, this probably hurt us a little bit against Oklahoma State, is our starting tight end, Mike O'Laughlin, who's been a good player for us, is out for the year. And we've been having to use our tight ends a lot. The two games we won, the TCU and Iowa State game, our tight ends played a huge factor, not only blocking but catching the ball. Michael Laughlin caught several balls, and then he also helped out, helped tackles with McDonald in the Iowa State game, and then which TCU's defense isn't very good, so I don't really know if they needed help in that one. No offense to TCU, but their defense is terrible. But that's the one thing that concerns me. We do have TJ Banks. He's a solid backup, and he's been playing well, but I don't know if he's going to be enough. Might need both of them. We've been having to play our third stringer a lot, and he just doesn't have the experience yet. But I worry about that rushing attack or that blitz and that Uzomah coming off the edge, man. That's if we can control Uzomah, I think we got a really good chance to win the game. And that's where I think the running game comes in, because if you can run up between the tackles, you kind of take him away, to an extent. And that's, if we can't do that well, then he's probably going to have another big day, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think your thought on the running game being incredibly valuable is very true and very apropos, in this game, because you do not want to allow Felix to just pin his ears back and be able to go after the quarterback. It will. Yeah.
Real quick, one more question. How experienced is K-State? Do they have a lot of seniors on their team, or are they pretty young?
I would say they are decently experienced. The offense is very experienced. I mean, Skylar has been around forever. He's a 24-year-old college quarterback, which you don't see very often. Deuce Vaughn, even though he's only a sophomore, I mean, he's played a ton of football and has been a huge part of the offense and is incredibly mature. Malik Knoll is their top receiver. He's been around since Bill Snyder in 2018. So Phillip Brooks, who's probably the number 2 receiver when he's healthy, he's been around since the Snyder days. The offensive line, maybe a tad younger, but still pretty experienced. Defensively, they have a lot of transfers, so they're not as experienced at K-State, but the secondary is almost predominantly comprised of transfers, for instance. And just scrolling through my brain, I mean, they're pretty experienced. There's not a whole lot of real holes where they're just playing young guys out there. I would say it's a relatively experienced team. Yeah.
Yeah, that concerns me a little, because Oklahoma State had nine of Oklahoma State's 11 starters on defense were seniors, and the other 2 guys were juniors. No sophomores or freshmen in their starting 11 on defense. Now, offense, I didn't look that deep into their offense, but as far as that goes, but I just, because their defense, Oklahoma State's defense is their calling card. Everybody knows that. So their offense didn't really worry me too much. Now, Jalen Warren, that kid's a beast. And we all know what Spencer Sanders can do, but I think the experience versus the inexperience is what really hurt West Virginia in that game, in my opinion. It was just too much experience, too many games under their belt, and our guys just couldn't respond when things got tough. And I think at the end of the day, that was a huge difference in the game.
Yep.
So that worries me a little bit going into this game with you guys, because I fear that might have, if we get down again and we're getting beat pretty handily, I worry that our guys won't be able to respond, and they might start having flashbacks from the Oklahoma State game. But we'll see. Hopefully they'll be able to respond well and get this Oklahoma State game behind them. I just hope I expect a good game. I really do think it'll be a good game because of, like we've talked about, the two teams are so similar.
I do too. Yeah, I'm expecting kind of a field goal game one way or the other. I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight. I really do.
Yeah, I won't try to give a score prediction because I'm always wrong. I had tried the 2 weeks West Virginia lost. I mean, TCU Iowa State where we won, I picked them to lose. So last week I picked them to lose again, hoping they'd win, and they didn't. So that theory went out the window.
Yeah.
But well, John, once again, everybody, for those of you if any of you are watching and don't know who John is, go check him out on YouTube. Most of you probably do. Make sure you support his channel and root for K-State when they're not playing West Virginia. But Nighttime has another comment here. He says they match up well. Yeah, talking about our teams. Yeah, they do match up well.
I think so too.
Actually,
yeah.
Statistically, definitely they do. But John, I appreciate you coming on, man, and taking about an hour out of your night, and hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Always enjoy it, and always enjoy West Virginia fans. I know I've said it before on my channel. Like, I really like Morgantown. That's one of the road trips I'll definitely miss from my time working in the Big 12. So I'm a West Virginia fan for sure when they're not playing K-State. So hoping for a good game this weekend, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Good night. I appreciate everybody hopping on here, and we're going to sign off. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.
See ya.